Commission will come to order, and thank you all for being here, and my good friend and colleague Jim McGovern, to this hearing of the Commission on CECC. I want to thank all of you in advance. Before we begin, come to order, and
Uh-oh, that's a reverb from the live stream.
oh, is it ready?
Yeah, it's going.
Okay. Before we begin, I want to mark a solemn anniversary. Today marks the 37th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. 37 years ago, millions of Chinese citizens peacefully asked for political reform, democratic openness, and basic human dignity. Their hope was met with tanks. The Chinese Communist Party unleashed the People's Liberation Army on peaceful demonstrators. Mothers lost sons, fathers lost daughters, and China lost an idealistic generation to the violence of June 4th, 1989. There has been no full accounting of those killed, imprisoned, or disappeared. The party still tries to erase a massacre the world must never forget. But Tiananmen cannot be erased. The enduring image of that day is the tank man, the solitary figure standing before a column of tanks. His courage reminds us that the desire for freedom is not Western, not foreign, and it's not imposed from the outside. It is universal. As I have said before, a choice has been made by all of us. You either stand with the tank man or you stand with the tank. There is no middle ground. Tiananmen is not a detour from this hearing. It is the key to understanding it. The same party that tried to crush truth at home now tries to chase truth abroad. The tactics have not changed. The technology has changed. The reach has expanded. But the purpose is the same, to make people afraid to speak the truth by almost any means necessary. Inside China, the CCP uses surveillance, censorship, prison, the pervasive use of torture, forced disappearance, and fear to maintain their grip on power. But what happens in China no longer stays in China. The party wants to control what is said about China here and to control who says it. The CECC has warned about the CCP, long arm, torture, forced disappearance, and fear to maintain their grip on power. The CECC has warned about the CCP's long arm, as I said, for years. Long before transnational repression became a common phrase, I held a dozen hearings or so of this commission and in my subcommittee on human rights, documenting and exposing a consistent pattern of global abuses, starting with Confucius Institutes back in 2014. Over time, tactics have become more digital and more ruthless, detaining family members in China, doxing, the use of spyware, deep fakes, Hong Kong bounties, and the illegal police stations right here in the United States. It is outrageous and unacceptable, and it absolutely must stop. Transnational repression is not only a threat to Americans, it's a broader, interconnected CCP strategy. We see that strategy in scam networks, stealing from U.S. citizens, fentanyl poisoning of our cities and our young people, PRC-linked land purchases near military installations, effort to corrupt politicians and elections, steal private personnel and biometric data, and intellectual property theft from businesses and universities. I would note parenthetically, when I held a hearing on how Google, Microsoft, and Cisco were enabling the Chinese arm of repression in China by censoring what people could see when they did a Google search, my personal computer, my committee's computers were all hit. Everything was taken, and it was all traced to Beijing. That was in 2005. They have gotten far more effective at doing that kind of repression. Everything was gone, and including personally identifiable information on me, and I'm not the only one. So many other people had the same thing happen. We see that strategy also in being replicated in other countries as well. It's not just the United States, it's Canada and elsewhere. These may all look like separate problems, but they share a common purpose, exploit our openness, gather leverage, weaken our institutions, spread propaganda, and make Americans pay a price for standing up to Beijing. But I have news for them. We're not backing down. The members of this commission, the people who are here today, are very distinguished witnesses. We will never back down to this tyranny. Transnational repression is the most personal form of that strategy. It brings pressure campaigns to the doorstep of students, the journalists, dissidents, artists, and family members. That is why state and local responses matter. A victim may first call the police. A student may go to a university official. A state attorney general may see the pattern. A state legislator may realize the existing law does not fit the threat. So the questions are practical. Do local officials and officers recognize this threat? Do universities know how to protect their students? Do states have the tools they need? And does the federal government have a real strategy? And are we deploying enough of our capacity and capability to mitigate this threat? That's why I'm so proud to work with Chairman Sullivan, Chairman Merkley, and Jim McGovern on the Transnational Repression Policy Act. This bipartisan, bicameral legislation would define the abuse, improve coordination, train officials, support targeted communities, and hold perpetrators accountable. Because victims need more than just sympathy. They need protection and a place to turn where those to whom they turn are well-informed and equipped with tools to stop it. But let me make one point clear. A regime that fears a student's question, a refugee's protest, an artist's statue, or the simple memory of Tiananmen Square massacre is not strong. It's not a confident superpower. I remember when we did that hearing, we brought in the Google people. We had them testify, as well as Cisco, Microsoft, and Yahoo. And I put up on the board what you do in China when you put in the Tiananmen Square massacre. You got nothing but pretty pictures of people smiling and taking snapshots and videos there on the square. Nothing about the massacre or the protests. They live in a culture of denial, and that denial has to be eradicated. I would say that any so-called superpower that does that lives in fear, and they are very afraid. It makes them perhaps even more dangerous. But they are not operating out of a position of confidence or power. Fear in the hands of a dictatorship, like I said, is dangerous. It becomes coercion. It becomes censorship. It becomes repression that crosses borders and reaches right into our own communities. So our answer must be unmistakable. If the CCP threatens people here, there must be investigations and prosecutions. If it reaches across our borders to spread fear, there must be sanctions. If it takes family members hostage to silence a critic, which they do all the time, we will demand their release and expose the cruelty of that tactic. And if it tries to censor a free people, we will defend and spread the rights of Beijing fears most. Spread of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and the right to tell the truth without fear. Because in the United States of America, unlike China, no one needs the party's permission to speak, to worship, to protest, to remember, or to be free. And that's why this hearing matters, and that's why having 4 very distinguished people testifying will help us get that message across. And thank you so much. Jim?
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleague from New Jersey, Congressman Smith, for his words and for his commitment to human rights, not only in China, but all around the world. And good morning, everybody. I want to welcome our witnesses and our guests to today's hearing on transnational repression. Today is June 4th, and as Co-Chair Smith pointed out, 37 years ago, the Chinese government directed the military to attack civilians who were exercising their right to freedom of expression to call for economic and political reform. Let us never forget those who bravely stood for freedom in Tiananmen Square and other cities, the mothers who never knew the fate of their children, and those who continue to tell the stories in the face of a government that seeks to silence them. And let us not forget that any society whose leaders are willing to use lethal force against peaceful protesters is a society at risk of losing its fundamental liberties. I am glad that the Commission continues to address transnational repression. In 2020, Co-Chair Marco Rubio and I created a new chapter called Human Rights Violations in the U.S. and Globally in the annual report. and CECC staff have just released a new special report on transnational repression. And I always appreciate the dedication of the nonpartisan subject matter experts who work for this commission. And this report is absolutely worth reading. China is the world's worst perpetrator of transnational repression. Freedom House lists the PRC with the most incidents, 319, since 2014, and that only accounts for reported incidents. Who knows how many people have gotten threatening texts or calls that they are too scared to report. But transnational repression is more than China. Freedom House lists Tajikistan, Rwanda, Russia, Egypt, Belarus among the biggest violators. Last year, I chaired a Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission hearing highlighting the TNR by India, Pakistan, and Hong Kong. This afternoon, Co-Chair Smith and I convened, yesterday afternoon, Co-Chair Smith and I convened a hearing on Turkey, listed with 160 TNR incidences. You know, hearings are fine, but it really is time for action. Advocates tell us that their #1 goal is to create a standard definition of transnational repression. And I am proud to join with CECC leaders, Senators Merkley and Sullivan, and Co-Chair Smith in sponsoring Transnational Repression Policy Act. It defines TNR in statute, strengthening efforts to counter it at the federal, state, and local level. This bill was first introduced in the House 3 years ago, but it has gone nowhere. In March, Freedom House led a coalition of 35 organizations, including Uyghur, Tibetan, Chinese, and Hong Kong human rights groups, in a statement to the chairs of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, asking them to mark up the bill. Foreign Affairs has scheduled 4 markups since that letter, but the Transnational Repression Policy Act never makes the agenda. And I asked Chairman Mast in the House to schedule it, to act. Our bill is important. It would give the U.S. the tools to lead on TNR. Equally important, we must acknowledge that the tools will only be effective if we avoid double standards. And I worry that we're falling short. 1, President Biden started, and President Trump completed, the rehabilitation of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who directed the murder of Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. We lose credibility when the U.S. government grants impunity for transnational repression. This commission characterized the deportation by Thailand of 40 Uyghurs to China as transnational repression. Yet the Trump administration has deported individuals who have been transnationally repressed in the U.S. by Iran and by Russia back to those countries. We lose credibility to ask other countries to protect TNR victims when the U.S. government refuses to protect TNR victims. 3, to the extent we label political interference by China in the U.S. as transnational repression, then we must consider Senator Bernie Moreno's meddling in the Colombian election as transnational repression. We lose credibility when U.S. officials act like CCP officials. 4, last year, the Trump administration sanctioned a Brazilian judge who brought insurrectionists to justice, falsely portraying legitimate accountability as transnational repression. We lose credibility when U.S. officials pervert TNR to help political allies. In September, our credibility will be again tested. Xi Jinping will visit Washington at President Trump's invitation. Last time he was in the U.S., thugs associated with the Chinese consulate in San Francisco beat up anti-Xi protesters. We must be prepared to defend the right of protest here. The question is, will we? This administration has deployed security forces to suppress Americans' right to protest. They're doing it right now outside of Delaney Hall ICE facility in Newark, New Jersey. If Xi Jinping asks President Trump to contain or control Chinese, Uyghur, and Tibetan protesters, will he do that? Or will he win behind the backs of those engaged in legitimate dissent? This administration has deported people for exercising their free speech rights under the First Amendment and the ICCPR to criticize the Israeli government. If Xi Jinping, asks President Trump to deport people for whatever reason back to China, we must make it clear that that is unacceptable, and we will not do that, and we will not stand for that. Transnational repression is a human rights violation. All human beings are entitled to the same rights, no matter where they live or how they feel about their government. And I thank the witnesses for being here today. I welcome the insight. I want to apologize in advance that I don't know if we'll get to my questions, but we just got a word that I'm on the Rules Committee that at 2:30 we're taking up the rule. So anyway, frustrating, but I want to be here for your testimony, so thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I want to thank our ranking member, and you know, while we do have some disagreements on some issues, you know, Delaney Hall is in my state, and I have been closely monitoring everything going on there. There are people who are credibly accused of rape, child sex trafficking, and I wrote 5 laws on human trafficking, including the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, who are in that facility. And, you know, the federal law enforcement, ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement police have been bitten, they've been kicked, punched. The level of restraint that they have shown is incredible, and so much so that our governor brought in the state police, and now the Newark police are there as well. So, you know, there's a lot of people in that facility. They were claiming that the food wasn't good. It is good. I just can't believe, you know, just because somebody says, oh, this water stinks, doesn't make it stink. Yeah, we got to be very careful. So this isn't the place, I guess, to debate that. We are here united and standing with our friends both here as part of the Diaspora, as well as people inside of China who are suffering the cruelty of Xi Jinping each and every day. I'm barred from going to China. I have tried to go. I've been put on the list. Global Times named me as an enemy, which I find they also named Marco Rubio as an enemy, and Jim. You know, so we need to push back as never before against the monstrous dictatorship of Xi Jinping. And again, you, the 4 witnesses, help bring a great deal of light and scrutiny. And what do we do next to that important issue? So yeah. Does he want to go to questions?
No, he wants to.
Did you want to say something?
Offer something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Please. Sure.
Thank you so much to my colleagues on the commission for all your leadership. I want to sort of hone in on one particular issue when it comes to the People's Republic of China, and that's the treatment of the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. This is a campaign conducted using digital threats, coercion, and essentially taking families hostage to enforce silence here in the United States and co-opting countries to detain exiles. And I've heard stories firsthand from the Uyghur population in my district. I hosted a town hall with members of the Uyghur community last year, and the top concern they brought up was transnational repression. And so here's some of what I heard. You know, one quote from someone who wanted to remain anonymous was, "Our families do not face abstract threats, but we are enduring active, multi-layered, state-sponsored transnational repression by the Chinese Communist Party right now." One Virginian who many here may know, Rushan Abbas, spoke publicly about the mass internment camp system back in 2018, and within a week, her sister, Gulshan, was abducted by the Chinese government. She was subjected to a secret trial and then sentenced to 20 years in prison without any due process. And on June 12th, she will be turning 64, and this is her 8th birthday in a row spent in jail. Another constituent of mine shared how the Chinese government has also blocked communication between Uyghurs abroad and their relatives in China and used families as leverage to prevent Uyghurs from speaking out. He said that my family and I have not been able to speak with our loved ones back home for 10 years. We still do not know what happened to them. We've been trying to get information through multiple channels, but we have not been able to communicate. My wife, who is a U.S. citizen, only learned about her aunt's death in China nearly a year after it happened. And my daughter even asked if we have any relatives at all because she can't speak to them. It makes people crazy. It makes people sad. It's a terrible situation. And I could keep going. We have story after story of transnational repression, the silencing of American citizens because of what's going on in the Uyghur communities in China. And we will continue to speak out about this. We will not be silent, and we will certainly give those folks a voice. So thank you, and I yield back.
Before we go to our witnesses, I just want to announce, you probably already know this, that the Congressional-Executive Commission on China today released a new report on the PRC's transnational repression and malign influence. The report documents in highly disturbing detail how the Chinese party continues to extend its long arm beyond the Chinese borders. The report is available today. I do hope people will read it, use it, hopefully effectively. And I want to especially thank Deanna Pelsang, Andrew Hartnett, and Rita Cheng, as well as our Chief of Staff, Scott Flipsy, for this important report. And now I'll go to our witnesses, beginning first with Stephen Cox, counsel to the governor of Alaska. Mr. Cox has served as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas and in senior roles at the Department of Justice. In Alaska, his work is focused on public safety, consumer protection, and PRC-related risks, including illegal imports, counterfeit products, and technology threats. We are grateful for his perspective on how state law enforcement officials can better respond to the threats from foreign adversaries. Let me say, Mr. Cox, you have a great senator from Alaska, and we thank him for his leadership. We have worked together on many Chinese bills, including the Fish Act, which amazingly he got through the Senate. There have been several hearings, and he chaired the last one several months ago, on how the Chinese government has taken over fish. Half of all the calamari in the world is coming from forced labor with Chinese boats. I mean, it's a despicable thing. He has gotten past a comprehensive human rights and pro-real trade bill called the Fish Act, and now we're looking to get it out on the House floor, his bill, ASAP. So I want to thank the senator for that. We'll then hear from Nebraska State Senator Elliot Bostar. Senator Bostar has introduced many bills in Nebraska to protect his state from foreign adversary threats, positioning Nebraska as a national leader in state-level security policy. One such bill, LB 644, was passed in June of 2025. That legislation included the Crush Transnational Repression in Nebraska Act and other bipartisan provisions to protect Nebraskans from malign influence from foreign countries. The federal government has a vital role to play, but states are on the front line as well of this China challenge, and we look forward to hearing from him the lessons that Nebraska may offer to all of our states on how to combat this. Our third witness is Arthur Liu, an attorney from San Francisco Bay Area and a longtime advocate for democracy and human rights in China. Mr. Liu was a student activist during the 1989 pro-democracy movement, came to the United States as a political refugee after the June 4th massacre. He has continued his advocacy here, including outside PRC diplomatic facilities. His story shows the reach of transnational repression. Mr. Liu and his amazing daughter, Olympic gold medalist Alyssa Liu, were targeted by PRC spying back in 2022 at the Winter Olympics. No family in America should live under intimidation from foreign dictatorship. On the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, and in great recognition for the achievement of, my wife and I watched her performances. They were amazing, and she got the gold medal, so that's fantastic. Our final witness is Anna Kwok, a Hong Kong organizer and policy analyst based here in Washington. Anna serves as board chair of the Hong Kong Democracy Council, where she supports Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement in the United States. She has testified before this commission before, has provided vital testimony about the human rights conditions in Hong Kong. And of course, we got passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, written by this guy over here, our chief of staff, but it is law, and she has been just amazing in what she has done there. After Beijing imposed the so-called national security law on Hong Kong, Anna continued her advocacy publicly despite serious risk. Hong Kong authorities later issued an arrest warrant and a bounty against her. Her father was imprisoned as retaliation for her work. The Chinese Communist Party wants brave men and women like Anna to believe there is no safe place to speak the truth, not even in the United States. And she is the polar opposite of that because she speaks the truth and does so with great, great grace and courage. We thank all of our witnesses, and I now yield to Mr. Cox.
Co-Chair Smith and members of the commission, I just want to thank you for inviting me to testify today. Thanks in particular to Senator Sullivan for inviting me. I know he couldn't make it today. But I want to thank the Commission for all the work that you have been doing over the last 25 years. I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to your good work, especially today on June 4th, 37th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square. As for me, I stand with the Tank Man. My own interest in the broader China threat, particularly the threat that it poses to Americans here at home, goes back almost 20 years. When I served in the Bush administration at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, I worked for the director, we encountered PRC gamesmanship surrounding removals and repatriation. And we realized that we were not just dealing with an immigration problem, it was an intelligence problem. During the first Trump administration, I served at the Department of Justice under Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Attorney General Bill Barr. And they carried on the China Initiative. And we recognized that the PRC challenge touched nearly every dimension of American life, especially IP theft and commercial espionage. And most recently, when I served as Alaska's 28th Attorney General, I stood up a counter-China initiative to examine how we could respond using our own consumer protection authorities. And that work continues in my new capacity as counsel to the governor. To my mind, for the first time, consumers are on the front lines of our geopolitical conflict with China. And when I say consumers, I'm not just talking about families and individuals, I'm talking about businesses and governments as well. Virtually all of us and our connected technology that we use can become an access point. And that is where state attorneys general can play an important role. Consumer protection laws allow us to pursue deception and undisclosed risks, areas where foreign influence often hides in plain sight. Alaska's consumer protection laws are among the strongest in the nation, and we're actively looking for opportunities to use those authorities, both on our own and in partnership with attorneys general from around the country, including my co-panelist, Attorney General from Nebraska, Mike Hilgers. General Hilgers, if I can just indulge a little bit, he has been a national leader in this space, using traditional consumer protection authorities to address risks involving Chinese-linked technologies that are sold to American consumers. These efforts and others demonstrate that traditional state authorities can play an important role in protecting Americans from risks that often have a national security dimension. Another area of concern, and the focus of today's hearing, of course, is transnational repression. We have not seen significant reported incidents in Alaska to date, but I would caution that this is not the sort of threat that is easy to identify without training and awareness. It may look like harassment or intimidation, unusual pressure on students, deep fakes, or threats directed at relatives overseas. But if law enforcement does not know what to look for, it can be happening right under our noses. And that is why I strongly support efforts to educate state and local law enforcement on this threat, to train personnel to recognize it, and to coordinate closely with our federal authorities and federal partners when these situations arise. Looking ahead, I believe the next frontier will involve closer coordination between attorneys general and administrative enforcement agencies too. One area that has drawn my particular attention involves cross-border payments platforms and money transmitters operating inside the United States. And I want to give kudos to Senator Tom Cotton on this commission, who deserves a lot of credit for publicly raising concerns about air wallets with the U.S. Department of Justice and the potential exposure of sensitive American financial data to CCP influence or access. I share those concerns about air wallets and this industry more broadly, and I have begun to have conversations in Alaska about whether our state licensing and regulatory authorities should take a harder look at money transmitters that are connected to foreign adversary governments. A money transmitter license is a privilege, it's not a right, and I believe state regulators should be asking whether companies entrusted with sensitive financial information can satisfy their state law obligations when data, operations, and key personnel may be subject to foreign adversary influence. States do not need to, and we shouldn't, conduct foreign policy to play an important role here, but states can protect consumers. States can safeguard critical infrastructure. States can ensure that Americans are not unknowingly exposed to foreign adversary leverage. And that mission resonates particularly strongly in a state like Alaska. Alaskans have an express constitutional right to privacy, and we take that right very seriously. If Alaskans are paying a premium for products and services, and we are, they deserve to know what they are getting and what risks may come with it. We're also America's Arctic state and Pacific state. We sit at the intersection of strategic cargo, telecom, critical minerals, ports, fisheries, and Arctic logistics. As a result, many of the threats that we might be discussing today are not abstract for us. So my message is simple. Many of the Chinese Communist Party's threats to Americans increasingly manifest themselves through areas traditionally governed by states: public safety, consumer protection, licensing, and infrastructure. And because of that, states have both the authority and the responsibility to act carefully and lawfully and strategically alongside our federal partners. Thank you again for having me, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Cox, for your testimony and insights. I'd like to now yield to Senator Bostar.
Co-Chair Smith, and honorable members of the Commission, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Over the last 4 years, the Nebraska legislature has passed a slate of laws designed to protect Nebraskans from transnational repression, safeguard Nebraska's data and critical infrastructure, combat malign influence operations, and enhance resilience to prepare for conflict. Nebraska is home to the U.S. Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base, as well as numerous nuclear missile installations that make it a target for foreign adversaries. However, every state has critical industries, infrastructure, and institutions that our national security relies on. The People's Republic of China is a threat to every state and every community in our country. Our work to address the threats facing Nebraska from the PRC began when we were alerted to Pentagon concerns about the pervasiveness of Huawei technology near our critical defense infrastructure. In 2020, the U.S. government took formal action to designate Huawei technologies as a threat to national security, but Huawei technology was still in use and being newly installed throughout Nebraska years later. In 2023, we drafted legislation to prohibit telecommunications companies from receiving state funds if they use or provide communications equipment deemed a national security threat. Additionally, telecom companies must annually certify that they don't use equipment designated as a threat by the FCC. The law also clears red tape obstacles to enhance security by stipulating that no additional permits or authorization from any state agency or local government will be required to remove prohibited equipment. Robust lobbying pressure was employed to keep Beijing-linked technologies in use, but elected officials from both parties ultimately rejected this pressure. After this law passed, my office was inundated with threat information from national security professionals who encouraged us to push forward. And we passed several more laws in 2024 to protect Nebraska against foreign adversaries. The Foreign-Owned Real Estate National Security Act prevents any person, foreign government, or entity determined to be a foreign adversary from holding land within 10 miles of a military installation, including nuclear missile silos. In cases of noncompliance, the law provides the Nebraska Attorney General with authority to force divestment. The Pacific Conflict Stress Test Act created a joint legislative and executive committee on Pacific conflict to assess how a conflict in the Pacific could disrupt and endanger Nebraska. The committee meets quarterly to evaluate the state's supply chains, export markets, critical infrastructure, and security apparatus, and makes recommendations to strengthen resilience. Lastly, in 2024, we passed the Foreign Adversary Contracting Prohibition Act. Legislation prohibits companies controlled by foreign adversaries from procurement contracts involving communications technology, network systems, and critical infrastructure. As we worked to pass these laws, we learned about local government officials being contacted by the CCP, and we started to hear from victims of transnational repression. Reporting emerged regarding an alleged Chinese overseas service station operating in Omaha, highlighting the threat of intelligence activity and transnational repression within Nebraska. We sought to limit the CCP's ability to influence, manipulate, and hurt people in our state by introducing the Foreign Adversary and Terrorist Agent Registration Act and the Crush Transnational Repression in Nebraska Act in 2025. The Registration Act illuminates political, propaganda, and influence activities conducted by agents of foreign adversaries by requiring that they register with the Nebraska Attorney General. Any informational material they distribute must be notated with a conspicuous statement identifying it as such and be submitted to the Attorney General within 48 hours. The legislation also stipulates that if an individual or entity is representing a principal designated by the Pentagon as a Chinese military company, they must begin all lobbying activities by disclosing that they are representing such a company that is a foreign adversary of the United States. Violation of this provision results in a $100,000 fine, which increases by $100,000 for each subsequent violation, up to a maximum fine of $1 million per violation. Any individual who provides information leading to a penalty under this act is entitled to receive a $50,000 reward from the state. The Crush Transnational Repression in Nebraska Act defines covered offenses as specific crimes already existing in law that will now receive an enhanced charge if the person committing the offense is an agent of a foreign principal. This legislation also punishes unauthorized foreign law enforcement by establishing that an agent of a foreign adversary commits a felony by deliberately trying to enforce a foreign government's law or rule in Nebraska. Our final 2025 reform conformed with what Congress accomplished with the Biosecure Act and the most recent National Defense Authorization Act. Our genetic protection law establishes that no medical or research facility shall use any genetic sequencer or software for genetic sequencing if such device or software is produced in or by a foreign adversary. Chinese companies sanctioned by the Pentagon have developed some of the world's largest gene banks for the Chinese military, supporting potential genetically targeted bioweapons about which senior Chinese military officials have written. This law takes every measure possible to cut off Chinese military companies from accessing the genetic data of Nebraskans, complementing the Federal Biosecure Act. Just this spring, we enacted a new and unique protection for critical infrastructure focused on denying foreign adversary companies access that could be used for operational control or sabotage, either in person or remotely. Furthermore, we codified new enhanced penalties for crimes that we define as bioterrorism, including bringing in different pathogens for the purpose of damaging our farmlands. Although each of these pieces of legislation faced opposition, we were able to pass them into law with bipartisan support. The effects are already visible. Awareness among state and local officials has increased significantly. Procurement standards have hardened, infrastructure protections have expanded, law enforcement coordination has improved. And Nebraska now evaluates infrastructure and investment questions through a national security framework that simply did not exist several years ago. Other states are emulating these models. Congressional leaders, executive agencies, and even other nations, such as the United Kingdom, have learned from different facets of what Nebraska has achieved. Most importantly, Nebraska's leadership in combating malign foreign influence has demonstrated that states have power and responsibility in this space. In fact, both President Biden and President Trump have called upon states to lead in driving solutions where we are closest to the security risks. We know our adversaries are coordinated and adept at attacking us at every layer of government. We must be able to defend ourselves utilizing this same whole-of-government approach. We must strengthen coordination between the states themselves and between the states and the federal government. Our work in Nebraska has been made possible by guidance from national security experts and practitioners. More established and formalized systems of coordination will help us further identify vulnerabilities, protect critical assets, and contribute fully and comprehensively to the defense of the American homeland. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Senator, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you are doing in leading the country. I hope that everybody follows your suit. You know, there are some states like Texas, like Utah, Georgia, but far too few. So thank you for that leadership. Mr. Liu.
Good afternoon,
Turn on your mic.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair Mr. Smith and distinguished members of the Commission. Thank you for inviting me to testify here today. My name is Arthur Liu. I came to the United States as a political refugee back in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And I'm also the proud father of the Olympic gold medalist Lisa Liu. and also 4 other wonderful children. Today is especially a sad day for me. 37 years ago, on June 4th, 1989, the Chinese government sent tanks and soldiers to kill students and civilians in Tiananmen Square and also in Beijing. At that time, thousands of students and civilians just gathered peacefully to call for the democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the rule of law, and for basic human rights in China. Thousands of them lost their lives, and hundreds more were severely injured. At that time, I was in Guangzhou attending graduate school in Zhongshan University. I was one of the principal organizers of the democracy movement in Guangzhou, China. When news of the massacre reached Guangzhou, I was devastated. I could not understand and believe how a government that claimed to serve the people could turn its weapons against its own young people and civilians. In response, I organized more protests in Guangzhou against the massacre. Of course, soon afterwards, I became one of the most wanted democracy activists in southern China. I was very fortunate to be able to escape from China to Hong Kong. And after I came to America, I continued to organize protests in front of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco and also in front of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., calling upon the Chinese government to release political prisoners, religious prisoners in China. I've spoken publicly many times about the human rights abuses in China. Like many refugees, I believed that once I arrived in America, I had left political persecution behind me. But an incident in late 2021 proved me wrong. To explain what happened, I must tell you a little bit about my daughter, Alyssa Liu. Alyssa recently won 2 gold medals for the United States of America at the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. Before that, she became the youngest U.S. women's champion in history when she won the U.S. figure skating championships at the ages of 13 and 14. She set records as the youngest female skater in history to ever land a triple axel in international competitions at the age of 12. And she was the first female skater in history to have landed a triple axel and a quadruple jump in the same competition program. In 2021, it was clear that she was on her way to represent the United States of America in the 2022 Winter Olympic Games in Beijing, China. Alyssa posted a piece of news about the human rights violations in Xinjiang back in 2018 when she was only 12, 13 years old. And I guess the Chinese government never forgot about that. And since she was most likely going to Beijing for the Olympic Games, I may also be going as well. So they were concerned. One day in late October or early November in 2021, I received a phone call. The caller identified himself as an official from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and he told me that he was conducting international travel preparedness and needed my passport and Alyssa's passport. He gave me a fax number for me to fax our passports to him. And I told him I would do it the next day. I never did. I was smarter than that. But later on, I got a phone call. Just a few days later, I got a phone call from the FBI, and he told me he needed to meet with me. And I met him at a Starbucks. He told me that a Chinese spy acting on behalf of the Chinese government was already in the San Francisco Bay Area. That was in early November 2021. He would be tracking my movement. He would be surveilling on my daily activities. He would be placing a GPS tracker on my car, and he would try to collect our personal information like social security numbers, and particularly our passport information. And the FBI told me to watch out for my surroundings and be careful. I was very worried when I heard the news because Alisa was most likely going to Beijing. And I was also concerned that the spy might do something to her in the United States. At that time, Alisa was competing in Japan. So the next day, she came back to America. I took her away from the San Francisco Bay Area to another location for training. As we were boarding the plane, and I received a phone call from the FBI. He told me that the spy was right on his way to our house. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a scene right out of the movie. It could not have been so coincidental that we were boarding the plane and the spy was right on his way to our house. The FBI agent informed me that they were ready to arrest those spies acting on behalf of the Chinese government at that time. But as a father, I was terrified for the safety of Alisa when she goes to Beijing to compete for the United States of America. So I told them, can you please wait until she comes back from the Olympic Games? The FBI said yes. And I also requested additional security for Alisa. When she was in Beijing, she was accompanied at all times by 2 adults from venues to venues throughout the Olympic Games. On March 16, 2022, the Department of Justice announced criminal charges against the spies. One of them was Matthew Zebros, the guy who called me, posing as an official from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and who spied on me in the San Francisco Bay Area. When the news came out, a neighbor from my office came over and told me. And he told me that he had seen this guy, Matthew Zebros, many times. He was lingering in the lobby right in front of my office. And of course, Matthew Zebros was charged along with, I believe, 4 other people in the spying on me, and also another dissident from China, and an artist in Los Angeles. I'm really grateful to the FBI agents who provided security for me and also my daughter. And I appreciate that the US government took forceful actions to prosecute those spies to the fullest extent under the law. But America cannot stop there. We can't just prosecute them. We must understand that not just me, a political dissident from China, the Uyghurs or the people from Hong Kong, we have to understand we will not be safe. America will not be safe until China becomes a democracy. We must understand China must have a government which respects basic human rights and the under the rule of law. We must also understand that America will not be safe until people all over the world can live peacefully and harmoniously together. We have a lot of work to do in America. Thank you for inviting me to testify here today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Leo, thank you for your testimony, your courage, and for, again, congratulations on such a fine performance on behalf of your daughter. And to think that something that she wrote when she was very, very young would be still in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party to intimidate and threaten, again, underscores the pervasiveness of this dictatorship. Thank you. Anna Kwok.
Members of the Commission, thank you for inviting me to share my experience as a target of intensifying transnational repression in the United States. In this battle against the Chinese Communist Party, a regime that fears opposition, feeling safe is a privilege. I am among hundreds of thousands of rights defenders in America who live every single day knowing we're being watched and threatened. All incidents of transnational repression I share today took place on American soil. Together, they illustrate the varied tactics of a transnational repression campaign. I served as the executive director of the Hong Kong Democracy Council, a U.S. advocacy organization sanctioned by the PRC. In May of 2023, after I testified before this very commission on the loss of Hong Kong's political autonomy and its implications for the U.S., the regime swiftly retaliated by issuing a 1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on my head. My assets were frozen, and my passport was revoked, crippling my international advocacy work. More bounties were also later issued on American citizens and residents. The bounty put a huge target on my back. State media, pro-CCP extremists, and individual propagandists launched a coordinated campaigns to discourage the American public from associating with me. Explicit threats to hurt, kidnap, rape, and even execute me on American soil flooded my social media. The lawfare and digital threats became physical in November of 2023 during Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to the United States, when I organized protests against Xi and campaigned successfully to bar sanctioned chief executive of Hong Kong from entering the country. The regime decided to retaliate on the streets of San Francisco. Masked men assaulted fellow protesters with metal poles, while WeChat groups circulated my whereabouts on the streets of San Francisco. I escaped physical harm only because fellow protesters protected me. Local police were completely oblivious to the existence of transnational repression and refused to intervene. To this date, none of the perpetrators, including American nationals, have been convicted. And for the first time, I felt as if I had been transported back to the lawless streets of Hong Kong. Even though I was on the land of the free, I am not free. The online campaign and real-life violence achieved a chilling effect across America. Some supporters of the pro-democracy movement stopped showing up to events. A few went as far as to erase their digital footprints. And their response is all too familiar. It happened once in my first home in Hong Kong, and it is now happening again in my second home in America. Nonetheless, I refused to back down. I led a campaign to expose the foreign influence and transnational threats brought by the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Offices. In response, the regime unleashed its cruelest weapon, psychological warfare. Last May, the regime arrested my father in Hong Kong. He was later convicted for fabricated charges. The state-run trial centered on an insurance policy my father had purchased when I was just a 2-year-old learning to say Papa. My father is imprisoned simply because he is my father. He's now a hostage serving a sentence for crimes neither of us committed. The CCP weaponized my love for my family in an attempt to silence me forever. I speak to you today as my 70-year-old father sits in a cell 8,000 miles away. I speak as someone with a 1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on my head. I speak as a target of rampant transnational repression, and I speak as someone who's standing my ground to combat an urgent threat to American national security. When a hostile foreign power launches centralized effort, spending state agencies, united front groups, and individual extremists to silence people inside the US, the government must respond with centralized, coordinated mechanisms. That's why I urged Congress, in particular the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to mark up the bipartisan Transnational Repression Policy Act immediately. Passing this legislation will provide the bedrock for building long-term cross-agency mechanisms that are necessary to protect America. This is a litmus test for the country. If the US does not draw a hard line and act quickly, the PRC will continue to push our boundaries, from running secret police stations to co-opting state officials. States like Nebraska and Utah are gearing up to protect their people, and the nation should get ahead too. We must confront the threats of transnational repression urgently before it becomes a normalized pattern that cannot be undone. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so very much for your bravery and testimony, bearing witness to an ugly truth that you are facing every day. You did say the word intensifying, clearly denoting or conveying that it's getting worse. And, you know, Xi Jinping will be coming here again soon. We tried very hard when he came last time for the APEC summit, and it was like, and when you say the local police, you know, were oblivious to what was actually happening on the ground, that's got to change, and a federal law could help that. The state laws obviously help it with your own state police and other law enforcement assets, but it seems to me that we, and I'm sure you all agree, we need a federal law. I have asked our chairman, Mast, to mark up the bill. I thought it might be up at our last markup, which just occurred, and it was not on there. I argued, as it turned out, not persuasively to do so. So I'm taking all of your testimonies back to the chairman, and he's a good man, Chairman Mast, and his staff, and say, this has got to happen. It's got to happen now. The sooner it happens, the better, especially, and we saw it, you know, in San Francisco, the way so many people, I had hearings then and had press conferences, as you know, pointing out how brutal the people were, you know, some of them seemingly coming out of the trade mission there, which is, I have a bill in that would close that thing down, but that too, it passed the House, never got through the Senate. Here we go again with that reprise. But so we need this bill, and I'm sure you all agree with that. So we will push really, really hard. It's got to be done before Xi Jinping comes again, because that will be the pivot catalyst for them to unleash hell on the best and the bravest and the brightest who have come here from China. And many of those obviously are still in China, their family members. So let me just, you know, you did say, Mr. Bostar, that with regards to the legislative senator, that there was some opposition, it's faced opposition. Who was against what you guys were doing?
So thank you, sir, for the question. We've faced opposition from a number of sources, but what tends to be utilized the most in Nebraska is primarily corporate aligned opposition linked to Chinese interests in corporations. And I think fundamentally that's mostly the case because they have the most robust lobbying presence in the state. And we see that consistently. Businesses themselves that are linked to China, as well as the associations that they belong to, consistently trying to fight progress when it comes to guarding against CCP threats. One example I'll use and give you that was sort of shocking at the time. Nebraska is obviously a pretty significant agricultural state, and when we were attempting to pass our foreign adversary registration requirements into law, we received thinly veiled threats from Smithfield, which is owned by the Chinese now, that if we went through with this and passed these bills, that there was the potential that they could shut down operations, disrupting the economy of Nebraska, certainly, as well as food supply for the United States. And so that's just one example that we faced, but we faced many.
Thank you for persevering. You know, I would just, back in 1994, I was one of those who led the effort to link most favored nation status with trade to China. Bill Clinton, sadly, delinked human rights and trade on May 26, 1994. But on one trip to Beijing, I met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I couldn't believe how kowtowing they were to the Chinese dictatorship to get the next deal. That goes for Microsoft and Bill Gates and all these other people who anything to get the next deal and to continue their. We had Enes Freedom testify here and talked about how the NBA just threw him out because he spoke about the Uyghurs. Again, another brave man, a great basketball player, but a brave man, and he lost it all. Lost his whole career. And he says some of his fellow NBAers wanted to support him, but they said, we can't. We don't want to lose, you know, that NBA slot that we have. And so, you know, it's amazing how corporate America just so capitulates so easily under the false impression that somehow China will matriculate from a dictatorship to a democracy if we just trade more. No, they'll become a more aggressive power with more capability, command and control right on down the line, if we give them all that capacity, which they've gotten. You know, Chris Cox, you all recall, the former member of Congress, did an amazing report back in the 1990s about how all the dual-use items that they were procuring that had ostensibly a civilian purpose, but also a very serious military purpose. So thank you for persevering against all of that pressure. But we've got to get a federal law and get more states to do the same with their laws and to resist that pressure, because it has been shameful how the almighty buck has, you know, you hold a dollar in front of some of these corporations. I had people that were part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Beijing telling me they have full religious freedom here. I said, really? If you believe that, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. It just does not happen. So thank you for doing that. You know, you did say, Mr. Cox, suggested that the central point is that consumers are on the front lines of the geopolitical conflict with China. Phones, apps, routers, cameras, payment platforms, cloud services, and connected services can become access points for PRC-linked data collection and leverage. Doesn't McAfee and some of the things that we all buy, I have McAfee, does that not protect against that, or are we being naive that somehow they could easily pierce that and get whatever they want?
Thank you for the question. I wouldn't purport to be an expert on that kind of a question, but I will say that that I do think that the Chinese are technologically very advanced, and a lot of times our defenses are just keeping up with the black hats, and so I think it's right to be concerned, and I think this is why I think state AGs like Attorney General Hilgers and Attorney General Paxton and Attorney General Uthmeyer and have teamed up to target some of these consumer protection violations. Where this technology has potential kill switches and backdoors that allow information that belongs to American citizens to go back to China. And we know that China has certain laws, like the National Intelligence Law of 2017, that requires, with severe penalties, cooperation by Chinese companies and individuals to cooperate with intelligence services like that on command. And so I think it's right to look into this, to investigate, and to bring righteous cases. And we intend to do that in Alaska.
Are we deploying sufficient number of federal assets to FBI, for example, to combat this, or do we need to beef this up significantly?
I'll take that. Thank you for the question. I can't. I've worked with the FBI over the course of my career. I worked on the Fort Hood Commission with Judge Webster. I've worked for 5 state and federal law enforcement agencies over the course of my career, and I've never seen a law enforcement agency that refused more resources and more investigative resources. So, although I can't speak for the FBI, I suspect that they would love to do more with more resources.
Thank you. Yes, Anna.
I would agree with Mr. Cox there that the FBI definitely would appreciate more resources. And in my previous experience from working with the FBI, I've also noticed that there has not been enough resources being put into investigating the foreign influence and transnational repression into the United States. And often civil society has to also help share reports and research results with the FBI just because they do not have adequate time or resources to conduct their own researches. But of course, there are certain information or intelligence that we're not able to get from the civil society. So if the FBI would be able to dedicate more resources into investigating transnational repression and foreign influence, I'm sure it will help protect American national security.
Let me just ask you, if I could, about the AI, which is transforming seemingly everything. What additional threat does that pose? This was not related to the Chinese as far as we know, but just yesterday, my top sheriff told me how some young boys took pictures of 2 young girls, 14 years old, 13 years old, and then created a whole sex scenario with them. You know, it was all AI, but it's devastating. They found the kids and the 2 boys, and they arrested them, and they'll be prosecuted. But I know in Europe and elsewhere that's being done now for Diaspora and human rights advocates. Again, another devastating way of trying to demoralize and hurt people who speak out. How bad is that right now? And do you see that getting worse?
The CCP definitely uses artificial intelligence to further repression on diaspora around the world and rights offenders. For example, my fellow activist Carmen Lau in the UK and Laura Harth, they are both being targeted with deepfakes generated by AI and with explicit images and videos that are used to defame them. And I think that is a very devastating development, especially for women defenders in this space. At the same time, we are also seeing more impersonation attempts, getting more sophisticated to try to conduct phishing, identity theft, and to procure information from human rights community. For example, my colleagues would often now receive emails impersonating myself with very sophisticated methods that sound like me and write like me in order to get more information. And last but not least, we're also seeing the rise of AI being used to generate propaganda materials on social media. With the use of AI, the CCP is able to now generate more materials that are dedicated to talking to the American public, to get into the rhetoric, and to form better narratives or more effective narratives in bringing false information to the United States.
Yesterday, Marco Rubio testified before the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I asked him, we don't get much time, as you know, you get 5 minutes, and so you don't get. And I asked him about Jimmy Lai. I asked him a few other questions, and I did so even more so privately. I asked him to help us get the Forced Organ Harvesting Act, the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act passed. It passed 406-1 in the House last year. It passed in the Congress before that. You know, it's my bill. It's one of the most serious human rights abuses imaginable, and it's being done, with hiding in plain sight. And we just can't seem to get it out of the Senate, but we're trying and we're hopeful. But if Marco was sitting here, and he used to sit right here, he co-chaired this commission and did so with, like the current senator from Alaska, with great distinction. And I mean that. We've got a great co-chair here. He brings an intel capacity and an understanding of Taiwan and elsewhere like no other that I know. He is just amazing. and he would have wanted to be here, but he couldn't just make it, but he sends his best. But what would you tell the president and Marco Rubio, again, on the eve of what will be another summit soon, and this is when the planning goes into it to try to make sure that everything we can do to mitigate Xi Jinping's cruelty is tried. What would you say to the president and to Marco?
Thank you for the question. I'll just I'll say this, and this is a point that I think you have made at this hearing and in others. There are certainly things that the states can do, but nothing speaks more loudly than federal action. That can mean executive action, and it can mean legislative action. You know, the awareness about Huawei and the telecom threat increased a lot based on what was done with Huawei. The prosecution of the spies that targeted Mr. Liu, that increases awareness. But legislation that would also arm state and local law enforcement with the training and capabilities to spot the transnational repression behind some of these otherwise ordinary crimes would be very helpful. And all of that is federal.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Smith. You know, I would tell President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio that the United States must take a tougher stand against the CCP's transnational repression and also against their human rights violations. I would call upon them to urge the Chinese government to release all the political prisoners, including Mr. Bin Zhangwang. He has been imprisoned in China for over 20 years. And I would urge Mr. Rubio and President Trump to call upon the release of Jimmy Lai and other political prisoners in Hong Kong, and really push them to come to the international stage as a civil society, as a government which respects basic human rights and the rule of law. I think this is another opportunity, to be honest with you, without any political prisoner released with President Trump's visit in China. I think this is another opportunity to bring those major issues in the next visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I would like to thank Secretary Rubio and President Trump for commemorating June 4th in Hong Kong, because today we saw that the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong lighted candles in a place where vigils are no longer allowed. And for Hong Kong, currently we have 1,946 political prisoners. And I would want to urge President Trump to seriously consider calling for the release of Jimmy Lai, Chow Hang-tung, and other Hong Kong political prisoners. At the same time, the upcoming visit where Xi would be visiting DC, it would be the perfect opportunity to establish better TNR response. The last time Xi was in the United States, we have seen how it really opened up the devastating can of transnational repression. And once they have widened the scope and widened the possibility of transnational repression, it was hard to push back. And this would be the perfect opportunity for the United States to push back, to set actually better protocols for foreign visits, for diplomats who will be on the scene, and for Chinese nationals here in the United States on how to behave, how to respect human rights, and how not to conduct transnational repression against people here on America's soil.
Let me just ask you what your view might be of what people inside of China understand, especially today being the remembrance of Tiananmen Square massacre. I've met with many students who come visiting, including at the high school level, who say Tiananmen Square massacre never happened. If you Google over there, and I went to one of their internet cafes once and Googled Tiananmen Square massacre, got nothing. I Googled human rights, and I got everything against, it was during the Bush administration, how bad he was, but nothing about there. And I even put in torture, because Manfred Nowak, who was then the special rapporteur for torture for the United Nations, had done a scathing report about the use of torture in China. So I put his name in, and it came up with everything but China. So is there really a serious lack of any kind of information in this culture of denial that they live in, perpetrated by the government, that they don't even know this stuff is happening or happened, past tense? Because I met with a group of high school students at a school in my state who said I was lying about Tiananmen Square. I said, it's, and then this, as I might have indicated, Cha Tian, who was the butcher of Beijing, who ordered the actual bayoneting and killing, when he came to this country, went down to in this case, it was the Clinton White House, got a 19-gun salute, because by then he had been elevated to head of their Department of Defense, the equivalent of our defense secretary, got a 19-gun salute. And I said he should have been taken to The Hague for crimes against humanity. So we did a hearing. He goes to the Army War College and says, nobody died at Tiananmen Square. And all over, the Global Times, the People's Daily, because I read the English versions, were extolling how he had said all this. And I had a hearing 2 days after he said it. We had all these witnesses, most of whom were Chinese witnesses, who said it did happen. The Time magazine correspondent who watched people die, but he got away with it. Clinton himself should have said, "Hey, pal, a lot of people died at Tiananmen Square. Quit, don't lie about this, because if you lie about this, what else are you lying about?" But they did lie. But I'm really concerned that it's as if it never happened, which is so important. And in Hong Kong, of course, they crushed the remembrances there, and of course throughout the rest of China. How do we get that through to the people as to what has happened past and what is happening today? Anna.
China, or the Chinese Communist Party, certainly excels in twisting history and twisting narratives. And right now, I would say there is currently an ongoing war on narratives and discourse between the US or democracies around the world versus China. Every single day, I go on social media and I see China spreading misinformation and disinformation about history, about what have happened, and especially on June 4th today. And in Hong Kong, we are also hearing rumors that starting next year, textbooks would no longer be allowed to mention even one line on June 4th. As of now, Hong Kong already is not allowing individuals or even people holding candles on the street of Hong Kong. This morning or last night, we saw news in Hong Kong where the police actually stationed on street corners to Hong Kong waiting to arrest people who dare to just walk around, who dare to just express themselves with very creative art, and who dare to just share symbols of June 4th, no matter how implicit. So we're seeing that China is really being very harsh and zoning in on canceling or on erasing any moments of history, any memories of history. And that reminds me of a scholar currently in the United States, Rowena He, who specializes and extensively discusses the importance of remembering Tiananmen Massacre, because it goes beyond just the Tiananmen Massacre. It is about remembering the atrocities of this regime. It is about remembering the present of the crimes conducted by this regime. And it is most importantly, remembering the people who have been sacrificing to fight for democracy and human rights in China. So I urge the United States and the American public to remember what has happened on June 4th of 1989, but also be cognizant of what is happening today on American soil. Thank you.
I do have one final question, and again, I thank you for your time, your expertise, and above all, your leadership. The Chinese student and scholar associations and other PRC-linked campus groups, there's talk of, further networking with them. We saw it with the Confucius Centers, which were nothing but soft power instruments by the Chinese Communist Party. But in 2015, I chaired a hearing with NYU Chancellor Jeffrey Lehman. And I raised the issue about complicity with the Chinese propaganda organs and the whole, you know, they were gifted a campus in Shanghai. You know, can you imagine that, a whole campus? And yet they were charged an exorbitant amount of money for tuition. And I asked them, who picks the students? The Chinese Communist Party? What's the selection process? If you're online, what can you go and visit? Can you talk about the Dalai Lama? I don't think so. All those things I asked them. And I also invited myself to go speak, and I actually got a visa, and he had me there to speak, and I always appreciated that. But it's the complicity of many of our institutions of higher learning to gain access. One of the most infamous of all was back in the early 1980s when Stephen Mosher at Stanford University, he broke the news about the one-child per couple policy and the use of forced abortion and the fact that the government decreed brothers and sisters illegal, and that even with the one, you had to get birth authorized permission by the Communist Party to have that baby. Otherwise, you're forcibly aborted. I did a number of bills that passed in the House, some in the Senate, to defund any organization like the UN Population Fund, which was getting a great deal of money, and Reagan was all for it, and we did just that. Trump has done the same thing again with the UN Population Fund and others. But meanwhile, Stanford, which is where Stephen Mosher was earning his doctorate, threw him over the side. They threw him out. Matter of fact, it was so bad that the Wall Street Journal did a piece that said Stanford morality and talked about how he had been disenfranchised from the university because he broke a story that they didn't want to have to deal with because they wanted access. So my question is, are we seeing any improvement on the part of our colleges and universities to the mega threat that the Communist Party poses, how they can be manipulated and used, you know, the information transfer that is applicable to their military? You know, at the state level, you gentlemen are doing tremendous work, but we need to do more, seems to be on the federal level, on all of this as well. But I keep asking our universities, stop partnering with these individuals. Now, if they were free, partner away, but they're not. It's a dictatorship. And again, anything they glean technology-wise is going right into their military-industrial complex. So if anybody would want to take a stab at that with the universities, yes.
Thank you for that. So in Nebraska, we're certainly making progress on the university front as far as attempting to decouple where we can with those specific programs. But I think your question brings up a broader challenge that we face with all of this, which is it's always inconvenient to do what we need to do. Whether or not universities being gifted a new campus, or whether or not Chairman Xi is coming to the United States and not wanting to disrupt a possible deal. There's always a reason why it's the wrong time to do what we should do. And it's exactly for that purpose that we have to resist that. We have to take the actions now. It was never convenient for us in Nebraska to pass the bills we did, to create the laws we did, to create the structures of accountability on the CCP, because there are costs. There are political costs. There are economic costs. We've allowed ourselves to become so dependent and integrated on our adversaries that it is painful to do what we need to do and separate ourselves, but it's required because there's never going to be a convenient time to do it. And so, yes, I think we're making that progress, but there is so much more that we have to do.
Co-Chair Smith, I'm actually an alumnus from the New York University, and I have a story to share. Back in 2019, during the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, I tried to organize a protest in support of people on the streets at NYU as an anonymous organizer. And initially, we were only expecting a few dozens of Hong Kongers to show up in solidarity. But in the end, hundreds of people showed up. And these hundreds of people were not supportive of what we did. Instead, they were students, faculty members, members recruited by the CSSA on campus at New York University. when they had such an overwhelming number of people. They encircled us, they started taking photos of us, and at the time, even though I was fully anonymous, they tried to identify me and dox me online, circulating our photos, videos on WeChat groups to try to find out which student this is, what classes they were taking, trying to trace where we lived and things like that. And very unfortunately, this was not the only time I encountered the CSSA. In 2023, when I was in San Francisco, as I talked about before, for the APEC summit, once again, CSSA was mobilized, and this time, at the San Francisco protest, many Chinese nationals were mobilized to support Xi Jinping. And among all the groups that were on the ground, the CSSA actually mobilized the majority of them. They managed to get thousands of Chinese students traveling to San Francisco from Los Angeles, from other areas of California, to support Xi Jinping and to show that China is the kind of leader they wanted, which of course we know is a lie. And even though they were not the most hostile crowd, but they definitely were the largest crowd. And we also found evidence that the CSSA actually promised paid meals and accommodation, telling students that they could just go to San Francisco for a trip, while in reality it was for propaganda and it was also for intimidating and fearing people like us. So I would say that for higher institutions, the existence of these Chinese students and scholars associations are definitely a problem. And the issue that they're still present in the United States allow the Chinese government plenty apparatuses for them to spy on and surveil students in America, including Hong Kong students in America who are merely trying to express themselves. So that's why I urge higher institutions to really reconsider their partnership with the Chinese government and also reconsider the existence and allowance for the CSSAs to appear on campus while there have been plenty evidence of their work that are necessarily acting as adversaries to American institutions and the government.
You could follow up those students that flocked into San Francisco. Was there any element of coercion? You know, their families back home, you do this or else, or was it more they were ideological simpatico with the Chinese Communist Party, naive perhaps, or what? I mean, or they're getting a free trip?
Yeah, I would say the majority of them actually are more naive. They're thinking that they're getting a free trip. It doesn't really matter if they go. They're just standing there waving flags. Right. That's what we observed the most from their WeChat groups. But at the same time, they are also definitely ideologists who would go out of their way to really shout at us on the streets or try to intimidate us with the number of people they have. And at the same time, I think even though they are naive, but as we have said in the earlier remarks, sometimes in the end, you have to pick a side always, as you said. It's either with the tank men or with the tanks. And I think for them, being naive doesn't excuse them from the fact that they are deciding to associate with the tanks.
Could states do more on this? I'm sorry, Mr. Liu.
I just want to add that from a diplomatic point of view, we must engage the Chinese government, whether it's a higher education in America, or whether it's a government or businesses. I strongly encourage them to engage in China, deal with China, but at the same time, we have to take a very strong position against human rights violations, the release of political prisoners. We can't isolate China. We have to change China. Thank you.
Related to whether or not states can do more, I think short answer is yes. Several states have done a lot. Most states have done something. Some states have done nothing. But no state has done enough. And so we need to be more strategic and coordinated with our actions. We often find ourselves, I talk to my legislative colleagues from across the country, and we spend, frankly, too much time reinventing the same wheel. And so we need better mechanisms of coordinating amongst ourselves, and we also need better mechanisms of coordinating between the states and the federal government. This is a policy area that for too long was left simply to the federal government. And because of that, and because it's more novel and it's newer for subnational political entities to be engaging in this, we don't yet have the necessary connective tissue to allow for this to be done as efficiently as possible. And so we need to be deliberate about developing those relationships and creating those systems and partnerships to allow us to really do what we have to do and move forward.
To conclude, I just hope and pray and let you know if there's anything we can do, especially Anna and Arthur, with regards to the threats that you receive ongoing, maybe as a result of testifying today. And Anna, as you know, this is not your first time. You are just incredibly brave. We will do everything we can. So if there's someone, FBI, otherwise, that we need to further alert to all of this, because again, these people are brutal. They are absolutely brutal. And I would reiterate my request to the Chinese Communist Party to allow me to lead a delegation to Xinjiang. I'd love to stop in Hong Kong as well and visit prisoners there. Even during the worst of the Soviet days, because I've been here since 1981, Frank Wolf and I, Congressman from Virginia, got into Perm Camp 35 in the early 1980s, where Sharansky and all of these great political prisoners were, 1,000 miles outside of Moscow in the Ural Mountains. We talked to the Procurator General at a big human rights conference. He said, nothing to hide. We said, we want to go to the Perm Camp. It took 2 years, but we got there. And we interviewed every prisoner, and one by one we got prisoners out. And then, of course, the Soviet Union fell, and they all got out. But in terms of China, the foreign ministry said, anybody who wants to go to Xinjiang can go there. So and they were already attacking my Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act at the embassy right here in town. Really, all lies. No, the lies are on your side. But then they also, almost the same week, it was the same week, said anybody who wants to go there. We did a letter immediately saying, we want to go. We want to go. We've asked repeatedly, so I'm asking again from the dais here, knowing that they'll hear this. I want to lead a delegation. I want it to be bipartisan, to go to Xinjiang, to go to the camps, to raise these issues, and to do so very, professionally, talk to prisoners without any fear of retaliation, and all of that. So the request is again requested, because they already said, we have nothing to hide, anybody can come, and we've been denied. Thank you. If there's anything you want to add before we close, I don't want to keep you longer than. Your testimonies are outstanding, helps us to do more. You're helping the cause mightily. Hearing's adjourned.